Happy Sunday night. It is Conservatism on Tap. This is the show that we do every week. Happy to have my brother John on here. This is really our chance to talk about conservatism and what it means to us, and a chance to really just go through the news of the week and how we see it from our perspective. I think I'm going to need it because we had our Founding Father show just a couple days ago, and we got into some really good debates, and so I want to hear your thoughts on that, John. You can kind of help me. Tell me where I was wrong on that, and maybe I got a few things right. We'll see. But the first thing I want to do tonight is talk about a contest we've had for the past week going for the conservative mind. So we kind of came up with this a few days ago, which was, how about we do some contests and things like that to be able to give away something that means something to us. And what we came up with was the Conservative Mind book. And I actually have my copy here, so we're going to be giving away a fresh copy. But this is the one that I had when I was in college, and you can see I took all kinds of notes in it and things like that. The Conservative Mind, to me, was really the first book that that set me on a journey towards trying to understand conservatism at a deeper level, than how I had originally been raised. And getting into that book was amazing. And it talks about Burke. It talks about all kinds of other, conservative thinkers. And it just does it in such a great way. So I know you've had a chance to look at it before. We're talking about it in our book club. Any thoughts on this book and what it means to the movement, John?
Well, for me, Wes, it was pretty crucial just to get to know Burke with it because let's face it, if you start, I tried actually, admittedly, you had actually shared with me the reflections on the revolution in France, and I started reading it, started highlighting it, and it was super heavy. And there was just so much about it. It might have been the copy, but honestly, it was hard for me to get through and understand exactly what was being said throughout it all. So I turned to the Conservative Mind to actually help me get at least some perspective on Burke before I actually jumped in. And then when I went back into the reflections on the Revolution in France, it helped make a lot more sense of what I was dealing with. So I do recommend it, especially as an introduction. But don't let it, I would say, define, your worldview on Burke. I'd say Russell Kirk has one perspective on Burke, and it's not the only perspective, but it's certainly a good intro.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good points there. I mean, the first one you're talking about is how a lot of the thinkers that we talk about, including him and Burke, they have very thick writing, and in Burke's case, it was really directed towards the issues of his day, and so there's definitely lessons to be learned there for us, but someone like Russell Kirk makes it a lot easier to extract that. And it's not just Edmund Burke. He goes through numerous different thinkers, some British, some American. He goes all the way through kind of the Western tradition, looking at these conservative thinkers. And he kind of tells you, hey, this is what their contributions were to the conservative movement. This is what, their messages can be compiled into. And now we have something that's a more comprehensible philosophy that's helpful for our politics today. And he does it all in a way that's really easy to read, which is my favorite part.
It is.
It is something.
It was definitely a breath of fresh air to me.
Yeah, he talks.
It's a good jumping off.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Talks about Alexis de Tocqueville. He talks about during the Civil War era. He talks about all kinds of other thinkers. He talks about John Adams. I mean, just so much good stuff there. And it's also something that we're doing in our book club, right? As we're starting to meet a couple times a month to be able to kind of go through this in more detail, which is a chance for people to be able to jump on there and kind of hear several of us talk about it, as well as to get their own thoughts. They can jump into that book club, take a look at the Conservative Mind and tell us what they think. So
right. Good plug-in for the book club there, and I definitely want to encourage everyone who's interested to join in. These and the people who are in, it's not like we're politicians going to change national politics the next day. We haven't, many of us haven't even read the book all the way through.
Yeah.
So if you feel like, oh, I haven't read this yet, or this looks like a big responsibility, we have an abridged version that we're actually going to tackle. A little bit of low-hanging fruit for anyone who's new jumping in. So we encourage everyone to just, hey, try it. We meet about twice a month.
Yeah.
And so highly encourage everyone to join in.
All right. So let's give a fresh copy of this book away. So I looked at how people had signed up over the past week. We got 19 different folks who signed up for the contest, who put their name in for the newsletter. So we'll do this random, John. If you just want to pick a number from 1 to 19, I'll type their name in here on the on my Ecamm Live script, and then we can announce it. So give me a number between 1 and 19.
Got to be 9.
9. Okay, cool. Also,
Yeah.
that's a really good number, and I'll tell you why. 9. So let me type it in. It looks like the winner is going to be Tim Morrow. All right, there we go. Tim, you are the winner of a free copy of The Conservative Mind. So I will send you that. Get your address. Get that on Amazon. So congrats, Tim. And then I think this is something that we're going to have to do pretty often. Is we're going to have to look at different books and announce a winner, especially for our new subscribers and stuff like that. It's just such a good thing. Instead of some kind of gimmicky giveaway, this is actually like spreading, the philosophy that we believe in. It creates great discussions. It's a good prize to give away. So I'm excited about that.
We should see how we can give beer. We need to figure out how we can give someone beer.
Yeah.
That was great.
Speaking of beer, so now let's kind of get into our itinerary. So talk to me about what you're drinking tonight. Let's get into that.
So I have good beer. Promise. No, it's a Founders Marble Roast. So it's a limited release, and Founders is a Michigan-based brewery. It's not local, but I have a story with it, and that's because one of the first dark beers that I had after coming back from Ireland was the Founders Porter, the Dark, Rich, and Sexy. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing that told me that beer, not like dark beers, could actually be more flavorful than just a roasted malt. So Founders has a special place in my heart for introducing me to a lot more flavors and a lot more experimentation on beer. I haven't had a bad one yet, but the Marble Roast is made with cocoa nibs. It's made with milk sugar and vanilla, and they usually make very well balanced beers where no flavor is overwhelming the other, and they're usually pretty powerful too, stronger than your typical 6%. So this one's 8%, but you wouldn't know unless I told you. It's really good.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So I'd love to be able to get into a routine of, kind of talking about our favorite beers just like you just did, and then, kind of introducing people to something maybe they've never had before. So that's really awesome.
It's a natural. I mean, they have pretty good beers all around the states, so you should be able to find Founders just about everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. All right, so let's get into. There's one thing I really want to talk about tonight. We'll kind of go through our show, and we've got some things to talk about. But the first thing I really want to talk about is kind of unfortunate. Is talking about Herman Cain. So I'm bringing up his picture now on the screen. And I was really sad to hear that he passed away this past week. And just an awesome man, great talk show host. He ran for president a few years ago. Just as
2012, yeah.
Meant a lot of things to a lot of people. And what I want to do is go through. There's a video here. He's from Georgia. He spent a lot of time in Atlanta. I believe he was actually born in Memphis, where we were.
Yep.
Definitely a Southern guy, and made his rounds to the South many times, kind of spreading the conservative movement and that type of thing. And in Cobb County, they did a video for him that kind of talked about his life. So I want to run that, and it'll kind of go over some of the things that he said and what he meant to him. So let's take a look.
Yeah.
My calling is difference, and I have done this all my life.
Aisha, I have some sad news to pass along. We have learned this morning that Herman Cain has died. Herman Cain is a product of Atlanta, a Morehouse man, was on WSB radio, of course, for many years, replacing Neil Bortz, a much-loved political commentator. You may not have always agreed with the message, but he was an influential man of great means.
America has come from rather than where America is going. I want to focus on where we are going, not where we come from. This sounds like a shucky-ducky kind of crowd on a shucky-ducky kind of day.
Yeah, so my first thought on that video is that I think only Herman Cain could get away with saying "shucky ducky." Like it's definitely his words. But tell me what that means to you. You know, when you take a look at that, you think about Herman Cain.
Well, everything that I have seen about him, he seems like such a likable guy.
Yeah.
Like he has a huge smile on his face. He doesn't have that sense of playing up towards agendas. He seems pretty genuine about just bringing his own life experiences. Wes, Herman Cain was that outsider before Trump was ever the outsider. In 2012, he may not have won the primary against Mitt Romney, but he was the guy that represented the small businesses that he had gone through the Jim Crow era. He had faced like segregation, racism, and the fact that he still has this smile on his face is pretty telling. The fact that he leaves, that so many people leave talking to him with a smile on their face as well is pretty telling. So I just feel like he's like the nice Trump. He's like the guy who was actually considerate and respectful, and the one who made a success with his businesses and into media, and wasn't shallow about it. So that's kind of where I see, what I remember from him. And then, some of the same stuff that he was running on, Trump, ran on that and ended up winning.
Right.
Which is something that I think we could talk about as well. But I think that he had a legacy that people resonated with.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. I mean, you're totally right about the smile on his face and like the optimistic demeanor that he had.
Yeah.
I always remember his 999 plan. That's why I was really happy when you picked the 9.
Yeah, the text.
That's perfect. Like, I remember that because it's very catchy, and the news cycle was all about that. I agree. Like he was kind of the nicer politician type thing, and CNN kind of roasted him over things in his past and stuff that they really couldn't touch Trump with. But at the same time, I mean, he represents a future. Or future-based or optimistic or forward-looking type conservative. I mean, you heard that quote there where he talks about, not dwelling too much on the past, but also looking at the future and thinking about what are conservative solutions to the current problems we have. And I think that's really important. I mean, I think that totally coincides with Edmund Burke. And, much of his thought was, hey, the reason that we pay attention to the past and that we listen to the wisdom of our elders, part of that reason is out of respect for them, but part of it is too, it's the best thing for us, is we can adapt that wisdom for the future. And so there is reason to be optimistic as a conservative. It's not all, gloom and doom. Oh my goodness, like, terrible, the Democrats are coming. I mean, that's part of the message, but another part is that the conservative solutions are based upon tried and true methods that work, and we apply those, and we can do it with a smile on our face. And I think Herman Cain stood for that. And yeah, we talked about John Lewis. We talked about him being a great man that will be missed, and I think the same for Herman Cain. He's another great guy. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
Take a minute for that. Go ahead. Do you have any other thoughts for that?
No, it's just the optimistic aspect. I think that just can't be emphasized enough. I mean, you see your highs and low points, but I don't see ourselves as the kind of conservatives that look back and say those were the good old days.
Right.
Those were the good old days where we had representatives that cared about us and that made differences, or that the world wasn't going to hell in a handbasket, all those kind of things. No, like the world always has its problems. The world always has people who are willing to find solutions. And I try and on my own level, I try to pass on that kind of optimism to my children, where amidst, say, the terrors of coronavirus or policies that you don't always agree with, like, find the silver lining and go with it, and run with that. I mean, for my daughter, it's finding the helpers, finding the firefighters and listening to the sirens and things like that, and just constantly finding this optimism in in what is going on around you, I think is a mark of conservatism, because you know these truths are forever. You know these truths outlast you. They're objective and they go far beyond anything that is just who you elect, or how your country is going, or even how the world is operating. You know, you've got, tons and tons of traditions that you try and hang on to and that you pass on, and you find creative ways to do that. So I don't think the optimism can be stressed enough.
Well, and then the other thing I would add to that is, when we talk about Herman Cain, we talk about how important he was to the conservative movement, and I'm sorry to see him go. He's also a victim, it looks like, to COVID-19, and so that kind of brings that, back into discussion. An older guy at this point, and so kind of in that higher risk area. But we had a chance this week, so kind of segue into that topic, to talk about COVID-19. We talked about hydroxychloroquine. We talked about what's been going on there, and tell me your thoughts on that and the latest, because in some ways it seems like we're starting to make some progress in getting back to work. School is a big discussion point that people are talking about, but it's still lingering. There's still cases increases in some states. I mean, I live in Florida, and so we're still dealing with a high number of cases, but at the same time, there is some hope there in terms of the economic, turn and potential for things to slowly get back to normal. But, what are your thoughts, John, on the next few months as we kind of look ahead and we hope to have, less victims from it?
Yeah, it's a big question, Wes. I mean, we're affected by it. I have a child that's supposed to be going to school, is excited about going to school. It's the kind of struggle where you have this kind of this COVID fatigue, right? This regulation fatigue, and that's been my worry with the U.S., which is, we're happy to try and do what we need to flatten the curve, but after about a month or so, we feel like we've done our part. And then now, can't my life go back to normal? I think what hurts me the most on a couple of levels is being part of the education system, and having friends as part of the education system. You don't hear parents saying that they want to send their kids to school so they can learn, or they want to send their kids to school so they can see their teachers and actually see their friends and have a life. It's so much about just trying to get for the parents to get into a normalcy for themselves, and that they're struggling to basically have to choose between the health of their child or maintaining, say, their health coverage, because if they don't go to work, then they're going to lose their insurance. I mean, you have people dropping off their kids at daycares knowing that their kids have tested positive for COVID, have not quarantined, because the parents have no other option and they have to go to work. And that's a struggle. Teachers feel like they are treated the worst of all, because, again, parents aren't being considerate about what the teachers need. And sometimes teachers feel that they're looking out for the safety of their kids. So that resonates with me a lot. I think also, you had that recent story about the Georgia summer camp where you had about 600 people, staff, counselors, kids, all go to the summer camp, and they're only there for about 6 days. Yeah. And half the people over half the people that were tested were tested positive. Many of them were asymptomatic, but it starts putting dents in this research that kids aren't susceptible, kids aren't going to be passing it along. And the truth is that kids have been home. And so there hasn't been a whole lot of data about kids getting in coronavirus because they've been home. And now that you start releasing them into summer camps, into schools, it is going to spread. So for us, schools have gone all virtual. And on one level, I totally get that. And on another level, I understand that parents are struggling.
Right. You gotta get back to work. You gotta make money, right?
Okay.
Get back. I think the thing is, and again, trying to channel some Herman Cain this episode, looking at this from an optimistic standpoint, we've come so far in this thing, right? Is January and February was when people were first concerned. We saw the outbreak starting, coming into America. We did the shutdown for several weeks, complete shutdown, and started to come back. Saw the cases come up, but now it just seems like so many businesses nationwide have gotten to that new normal, right? They're starting to figure out, you go to Starbucks now, and you run in there and get your order and get right back out, or you go through the drive-through. They've limited some of the lounge access and things like that. And so many businesses are figuring out how to survive in this thing as we slowly start to open up. And I think school is one of the last big hurdles that we have to get through in order to get back to a point where we truly can start to enjoy things again, right? So living here in Florida, you can go to the beaches. That's awesome. That's great. People tend to distance there pretty well, is what I've seen. Obviously, you can get food. You can go out to eat. Certain places like Walmart and Lowe's make you wear a mask now. Okay, maybe it helps a little bit, maybe it doesn't. But school is really the big debate. But if we can overcome that hurdle, then really we're in a good spot, because as kids go back to school, obviously there's going to be more cases. There's going to be a spike. But the question is, are we ready to handle that? And if we can, then parents truly can go back to work, and the economy starts back up again. And at some point, vaccines should start coming through that should help with this to some extent. So this is like one of the last big struggles, I think, before we turn the corner on this. And if we can just do that, then you're going to start to see, the economy ticking back up and starting what's probably will take several years to recover, but you can start to be part of that. And I think that's what everybody wants to get to. And that's why they're so excited about making this last move, to be able to open this back up.
Yeah, and there's just that debate about, everyone's kind of risking themselves to going back to work. We're all risking ourselves to go back to work. And I think there's one side to listen to, which is teachers will have to go back to work as well. But then again, like not all of us are in a room with 20 some odd kids, and trying to make sure that they social distance, and how much does the facility actually work against them there. But it does make me wonder about how much, not that school systems need to be overhauled, but what are creative ways to try and go back to school? What does that look like? Can schools, what can we do to the facilities? Are these facilities just going to sit there all year while kids are online? Is there not some way to repurpose the facility in a safe and effective manner where kids can get some type of educational experience that's personal? It may not be every day. It may not even be as robust as a hybrid 2 days on, 2 days off kind of schedule. But let's use the facility in some way, repurpose it for the year if that's what we have to do to get kids to be back on campus and to experience some type of education.
Yeah.
But that's where I want us to get to. And right now, at least for our county, we've been so slow in turning out. We don't even know at what date my kid is in school because they haven't announced it yet.
Yeah.
You go on the website, you go on the email list, and they're still on this old structure that was released before March, and they haven't updated it yet because they only just now decided to go all virtual. So there's just so much last minute reactions, and there just hasn't been this moment, Wes, where we are understanding what we're dealing with, and therefore this is our plan. It's just this constant juke of saying oh, that happened. Well, I guess we'll just do this, and hoping to see if that's going to work or not. And I wish that there was just a little bit more intentionality going on here about what to do with our education.
Yeah, it's about balance, right? That's one of the things we talked about when I had Kyle and Chris on. It's about balance. It's about finding what works in particular situations, in particular places, and what doesn't. And a lot of times we want just an easy solution that's going to just cure this thing and fix it, and we can move on. And that's not really how science works very often. Is it takes a while to get where you need to be. And we talked about hydroxychloroquine, and that's a really great drug for someone who is really in a bad spot, especially someone who doesn't have heart problems, pre-existing conditions. They take hydroxychloroquine, and there are studies that show there's a good chance that that's going to help them survive COVID. They may have some symptoms later on that they're going to have to deal with, but there's positive trends with this. But is it something that you should just take whenever you want, or without a doctor, that kind of thing? Probably not. There's a balance act there, right? And the same thing with schools is trying to figure out what works for one family, what doesn't for them, depends on their risk, that type of thing. But I see us getting there. As violent and as difficult as it has been over the past several months, I see us making progress to a point where it's not going to be easy, but we're going to get to a point where school does reopen, maybe virtual for some, and maybe brick and mortar for others, and it's probably going to be a balance for most. But we get to that point, and then parents are going back to work in increasing numbers. Businesses are making it possible for that to happen. And that's when I think the hope starts to come back, John, as we start to get to a point where we're like, oh man, that was awful. But we're starting to make it through COVID-19. And we can look back, on our lives for the rest of our lives and say, hey, something that economically was in some cases worse than the Great Depression in terms of GDP and unemployment. We made it through that. Something that killed over 150,000 people is something that we were able to live through and survive. And as you remember people that, unfortunately were lost, we can also look at what has been gained through this, and the strength that we've developed. And that's the days I think that everybody's looking forward to. So
I
any
think
last thoughts on
what I wish. What I wish out of all this too is like when you're like the hydroxychloroquine debate.
Yeah.
Like when you get a prescription bottle. What I wish is that basically Americans, everyone, would just learn how to understand research. I mean, it's not easy, and we try and streamline it as being a simple thing to understand through a news article or But I mean, I tell you, like I help out med students using PubMed, and that's where like the research gets really thick and really heavy, and that's where all the strong work is being done is in those articles. But it's also very, very specific. It's like when you get like a prescription bottle, and it's like take 2. But don't take longer, don't take 8 within like 4 hours, and, call your doctor if you're this or this or this. Like there have been studies and studies and studies to get you like this summary of information that's on the bottle. And that's how it is with, medication in general. It's just, and we're working with like a quarter of the amount of studies that we need to actually make definitive statements. So I think in all of this, I would just say, listen, go to the research, read it, and see where it's limited. You can't just go off of it and say like, okay, bam, then obviously this is effective,
right?
For us, this is effective for everyone. No, it's like look at where the study was going.
Yeah.
See who's being tested, and see its limitations and see what it adds to the conversation. But it is far too early to make blanket statements about treatments for the whole world.
Yeah.
Like, come on, it's not there yet.
Yeah, we talked about that, and that's something that we're committed to doing here is on this show and everything that we do. I mean, I spent several hours reading through the actual studies that were based on, looking at hydroxychloroquine and what people were citing as, hey, this is a miracle drug. Well, when you look at the studies, like it was affecting the death rate in a positive way. It was cutting down on, the mortality rate, but it wasn't eliminating it. It certainly wasn't, what people were saying. And so that you're right. That's important to do, and that's something that we're always going to do is try to help people make sense of what's going on in a balanced and fair way without being sensational and over the top. So the last thing tonight, though, is I want to get to one of the questions we had. Someone just sent one in as we were starting the show, and it's from Jake Winkler, and he said, how high do taxes need to get, and how many regulations on guns does it take to look at our politicians as redcoats? So totally different topic here, but Jake was asking, and it looks like he put in another question here. We'll get to that one in a second, Jake, after we do your first. But he was talking about taxes getting pretty high. He's talking about regulations, on guns. I mean, you could look at the regulations on mask wearing. You could look at the regulations on businesses. You could look at the amount of spending that has happened, in the COVID era. But even before that, I mean, Congress is debating a bill now that would spend another fortune, trying to get aid to people and continue the unemployment benefits. And I think what Jake is asking is that un-American? To be going that high. So let me get your thoughts on that, John, and then we'll get to Jake's other question here in just a second. Go ahead.
I mean, I think that goes into that debate that's been since the inception of America, which is like, to what degree do we feel like the government is protecting the general welfare of all of us?
Yeah.
Versus protecting like the individual freedoms that we all enjoy.
Yeah.
And, to what degree, is the state allowing me the freedom to still do, in my opinion, what's right, what's good. And like, so far, I haven't felt that kind of restriction yet. I mean, yes, do I have to wear a mask when I go into Aldi to do that? Yeah, I have to do that, right? Or I'm not going to be able to get my groceries. But I have the freedoms that I enjoy in my life is, I can take my daughter to certain places to have fun. I can still give blood when I need to in a safe way. So in those things, like, I don't feel that I'm being restricted in the ways that are most meaningful to me. If anything, I get frustrated with my church because I don't think that they're operating in a safe manner. But that's not really related to the government in particular. So on that regard, I'm not feeling too oppressed per se. On that, I am very concerned about the deficit, though. I mean, Herman Cain would be as well about the deficit, about higher taxes. He was all about making sure, especially like in 2012 when we were coming out from that recession. He was, when we were bailing out businesses and things like that, he was saying, no, we should not be doing that. He was against that. He was against government growing bigger. He was all about the infrastructure and making sure that we get our jobs back, right? And let the people grow the infrastructure and let that soar. So to that degree, I do get frustrated. I mean, my hourlies that I'm managing can't find jobs because we're not giving them hours. They can't find jobs either. And that's super, super frustrating to me. So the fact that this bill is being caught up in Congress and they're not wanting to release any small bills that they agree on. They don't want to go ahead and pass the stuff they agree on. They want to package it up in this huge thing so they can keep it for negotiations. That gets frustrating to me. If you already agree that certain businesses need help or that individuals need help, let's pass the things that you agree on, and then we can hammer out the things that you don't agree on a little bit later on.
I'm going to get to another question here. We had a couple more come in from Joe Evolution. Before I do that, let me though respond to what you were saying and to what Jake is saying about how big does government grow before it becomes un-American. And I think what truly is American is to have government at the lowest levels being the most active, right? We've seen that from the beginning. I mean, we were colonies that grew into states. We were very concerned with states' rights for a long time. And now increasingly we rely on the federal government for, it seems like, everything. And we've just talked about how COVID-19 really is different in different places based upon a whole lot of factors, including, how much travel do you allow, how big is your state, how dense is your state, how many cities does it have, how many, ICU beds do you have in your hospitals. There's all these different factors. And so some type of government one-size-fits-all solution is not going to work. And that's where empowering the states and the governors and the local levels. I mean, here in Florida, it's totally different in Miami and South Florida than it is in northwestern Florida, where we're not as dense and it's not quite as urban. And so allowing people at the lowest levels to be equipped with the tools to be able to solve this is key. So, but Joe Evolution asked, what is this channel about really? What is our channel about really? And to that one, I'll take this one, John. So,
it's about beer.
Yeah,
it's about
beer.
Haven't we talked about that?
This show is about a little bit about beer, but mainly about conservatism. And it's about Burkean style conservatism and what that means. If you look at our website, www.theburkeanconservative.com, you'll see that there's an about section that you can go through there, and you can look at everything that Burke believed and what that means for conservative theory. Like we just talked about at the beginning of the show, we're giving away books in terms of what that means, and it gives you kind of the history, the context, and the principles that conservatism has been based on for centuries, helps you see conservatism in a broader context, and connects you with people that you can have those kind of discussions with. And so we're doing that every week. We do the Sunday night show, Joe, every Sunday night, so you can talk to us, but we do several other shows throughout the week. We've got a book club, and then as you've seen, we're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We talk conservatism every day, pretty much all day, in some way, shape, or form. So you're welcome to join and give us your thoughts. Go ahead, John.
You don't have to be a conservative.
And you don't have to be a conservative. Thank you. We've got liberals, we've got moderates, we've got libertarians that are on our program, that are on our message boards, that are commenting all the time, and that's totally fine with us. We're not going to shut someone down because they disagree. As long as they're respectful and rational and want to engage in debate, and that's a lot of fun. But let me get to Jake's question, and then I think that'll call it for tonight. He said, I'm going to read it to you, John. He said, so on the medical debate, I'm going to add it here so that we can see it on the screen, if the program will allow me. He said, there we go. So on the medical debate you're bringing up, you stated 150,000 COVID deaths in the last 7 months. Let's take that as a fact. That's equal to the regular year's malpractice deaths. So isn't it a little overhyped to begin with in terms of, COVID-19, I think is what he means, is the entire panic and the fear and, this dreadful, dreadful disease. I think he's asking, is that overhyped to begin with? So you take your thoughts on that, John, and then I'll give mine, and then we'll call it a day. Go for it.
On the overhype, I do get a little bit about where that perspective is coming from, because now we're not really just counting the number of people that are being tested positive. We're counting about the number of tests being positive. So, for instance, in Virginia, if I go get tested at a Walgreens and at a CVS and say at, another Walgreens or something like that, or at my, physician's office, all within the next, 3 days, just because I'm hypochondriac, that's 3 positive tests. That if I'm positive, that is, that's 3 positive tests that come through, and that's going to be reported as 3, not 1. So when you're talking about the number of positive tests coming through, I get how people feel that, okay, the number is being like overstated, or the number of deaths are being
Yeah.
overstated here and there. Although they're trying to also factor in the number that's not being reported as well, because they feel like we're underreporting. So there's this weird gap of averages that they're trying to get to. My view on it, especially when it comes, and I think this relates to like families taking their kids to school, because people are saying the same thing, isn't this overhyped? You risk your kid going onto the bus, not wearing a seatbelt, and then they get into an accident and they're going to die. Like, you're always risking your kids. So what's the deal here? I think the deal here is just that, like, hey, like flu, we have treatments for that. We have vaccines for that. We have things in place that if someone gets the flu, we know at least what we're dealing with. With a car, we know what we're dealing with. You got to wear the seatbelt. You got to abide by the right side of the road and things like that. With coronavirus, it's still new. It is a brand new contagion that we're still trying to figure it out. And I think we underestimate just how quickly we think that we can get a grip on what it is that we're dealing with. So until I have more information about it, I mean, things like the summer camp kind of, they put me on pause.
Yeah.
As soon as I think that my kids should go out and play on playgrounds, then I see that and I'm like, I got to rethink this.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. Is that it's just still new. You might be right. This might be overhyped. We don't know that yet.
Well, so my thought is that everything is overhyped. my thought is that in today's world, like, everything is sensational. Breaking news, and then it's Kim Kardashian has an update on Kanye West, like, mental health. And like, he checked into a clinic. Oh my God! And then he checked out of a clinic. Oh my God! Like, everything is overhyped in today's, like, they whether it's CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, like, they are always pushing that panic button over everything. The jobs report is the worst that we've seen. 30% loss in GDP. How are we going to ever recover? And Trump has played the media like a fiddle because of that. He knows if he says anything that's slightly outside of, like, the social norms, that they're going to run with it and broadcast it for him. And he's been doing that for years. And so I would say, to Jake's point, I think that, almost everything is overhyped, in the way that they frame COVID-19 makes you think that it's Armageddon, that everyone's done. The reality is that COVID-19, I think, is a danger for certain people. If you're someone who has a respiratory illness, if you are, in the older crowd, if you are considered high risk for other reasons, then it is something that you should, be cautioned about. But if you're younger, if you're taking the right steps, to be able to handle this, then you really don't have to have a concern about dying. First of all, you do want to be smart, so you don't want to be taking somebody out of, of a nursing home and getting them infected and throwing them back in. You want to take steps for those people that are at the highest risk. But, sometimes I feel like the media treats it like everybody's high risk. And that's not the case at all, right?
When all that protests when the protests were going on, they're still going on. But when the protests were the big news, like coronavirus took a back seat. All of a sudden, like it was positive to go out and not social distance really, and to tear down monuments and things like that. So and then coronavirus was gone. It was just where did it go? It's still there, and of course now it's back again. I think for me, I still have that degree of, like, probably where I get a little bit more unsure about coronavirus is because my daughter has type 1 diabetes, which is already strike 1 against her life. I don't want to strike 2 against her when it comes to coronavirus. So that's my perspective, and that's where it comes from with someone who already is dealing with a chronic health condition with their daughter, and that's where it's complicated, like Wes is talking about.
Yeah, Joe Evolution put in a couple other really good thoughts. Appreciate what you're saying here. Is he's talked about the reason that COVID is so dangerous is because people are failing to, serial convert. He works at a lab for a very large hospital. People think they know about COVID-19 based on the news, and that's very true. Is like, I'm an expert. I watched CNN for an hour and I listened to the governor of New York do a press briefing. I'm an expert on this, right? The reality is that when you deal with any kind of threat, is you need to be prudent. And this also goes to Joe Evolution's other comment. What is our channel about? The biggest thing that Edmund Burke, the guy that we based this off of, the biggest thing that he talked about was being prudent. And what he meant by that word was not overreacting, not throwing up your hands, not panicking, is you look at what you're up against and then you take smart steps. And America has done that so many times, right? Whether it's, Cold War, whether it's World War II, like there's so many, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War. In every case, there were many steps that were taken that led up to the conflict. We didn't just immediately fight the British. There was a back and forth, and I love that series, John Adams, that captures that, the back and forth. They're trying to hold it together. In the Civil War, there was the Three-Fifths Compromise, right? There was Daniel Webster and Henry Clay trying to work towards how do we, try to reconcile this before it comes to war, and eventually that's what it had to be. You see that in World War II. We didn't want to be a part of it. Is FDR, trying to keep us out until, we have to because of, December 7th, 1941. We've got to be a part of this now. 9/11. We weren't as engaged in the war on terror or whatever you want to call it until 9/11 happened. And so that prudent piece of this, the Cold War is another one, right? Not going off the rails because of communist Russia. We take our time and see if we can beat them in other ways economically. And the same thing with COVID is if you just shut everything down and keep it there, then, you're going to have problems there too. If you keep everything open and just ignore it, well, you may run out of hospital beds, and that's a problem for a lot of people. And so there's a balance. There's a balance in all of that, and that's that prudence that Bert gives us in a philosophical context that we can import to today and say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be prudent in this. I'm going to look at, local government. I'm going to look at my area. I'm going to look at the number of cases that we have. And you know what? We don't have that many cases. People can go about their business unless they're high risk. Then you have a situation where, now it's starting to spike. Do we have a death rate that's going through the roof? Not yet, but maybe we need to bring in some more doctors. We need to create some more ICU beds. We need to have hydroxychloroquine on standby for people that need it. And then if you do truly get to a horrible situation, that's when you start saying, okay, let me take some harsher steps to shut down. In some ways, I was frustrated with a lot of the responses that happened because, it was just like shut everything down. And I'm like sitting here in Florida, in Northwest Florida, back in February, and I'm like, what are we shutting down for? We only have like 30 cases in our entire county, of like over 100,000 people. This is crazy, as opposed to, hey, we don't have that many cases, let's wait until we get to a point where we start to see that climb, and then let's take appropriate, rational measures in response. And I think, Jonathan, to your point, we were talking about school, we're getting there. We're getting to a point with school where, hey, are you in a situation where you have a high-risk individual in your home or your child has a lot of contact with them? Okay, let's take some steps. Let's have a plan. You don't? Everybody in your family is healthy, young, like all of that. Go to school. Like, why not go to school, right? Like,
find the high-risk folks and see what you can do about giving them as normal life as possible, but it's going to look a lot different for them, So I totally am in agreement with that, where we were singling out the high-risk folks or who would self-identify as high risk and wonder what we need to do. And then all of a sudden the governor came out and said everything's shut down, everything's closed.
Right.
And that was the answer for all of us.
Overcompensation and, again, looking for those easy answers. If a shutdown is not going to fix everything, masks are not going to fix everything. Hydroxychloroquine is not going to fix everything. It's going to be a balance, like it is with anything, like it is with the common cold, like it is with the flu, like it is with cancer. It is not just a single treatment that is going to work every single time for every person. And I think we're discovering that. It's painful, but we're discovering that, and that gives me hope. It's sad, to lose people. It's sad to we lost someone in our county who was a pretty well-known and respected guy who worked at one of the high schools, and that was really sad for where I live. It's sad to lose people like Herman Cain, and I don't want to seem insensitive to their families, for this. But at the same time, life goes on, and we have to continue to adapt and find ways to survive. And that's ultimately, I think, how we honor those folks best is, Herman Cain being an optimistic, friendly, passionate guy. I think he would be absolutely sad if he saw America losing that. So let's not do that. Let's continue to work towards
it's not about not protecting anybody. We want to let's find the people who are high risk and let's protect them. That is what our duty is, to our fellow man, is to protect the people who could actually die from this. You know, we don't want our grandmother to die, you know, like keep her in the care that she needs to be. But like, sorry, she shouldn't be going, outside right now. She shouldn't be doing that. And like, if you have been outside, you shouldn't be seeing her until like you're, making sure that you're 14 days clear. Like that's the safety regulations that you need to abide by. But you're right, Wes. Like that doesn't mean that if you are young and you're not seeing like your grandparents right now, like doesn't mean you can't go to work. You should be able to do those kind of things. But that's where I think that I wouldn't say that we failed. It's just that hopefully we can learn these lessons as coronavirus is going to continue, because we're only halfway through, maybe.
Yep. I think we are. I think we're getting there. Like I said, with the school, that's one of the last big hurdles, and then we start opening up businesses more and more, and doctors continue to create space and test new methods. I really do. I think we're making a turn on this, and I think that's evident in a lot of ways. And being smart and prudent is going to lead to even more of that success. So we're getting there. But anyway, so hey, thanks everybody for the comments. We had a lot of good ones today. Appreciate the feedback here. Congrats to Tim again for winning a copy of The Conservative Mind. Great book that talks about the principles that we mentioned. Good stuff for today. And if anyone has any more topics that they would like us to cover, you got any more questions, don't hesitate to send them our way. You can comment here on the show, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can send us a direct message. We'll be happy to make that a topic for next week. So any last words, John, before we head out?
Just open up to any comments about what beers you'd like to see us drink.
Cheers.
And we'll come up with a new one next time.
All right. Thanks, Johnny. Have a good night.